Thank you for pressing start on episode 27 of Underplayed, KZUM's indie video game podcast. Today we have 2 secret games, followed by a review of our featured game, Yooka-Laylee. Here on Underplayed, we review indie games of all kinds, the games with small budgets but big hearts, the lesser-known experiences with imaginative ideas. I'm Bopo, and joining me is my player 2, DiscoCola. What's up, DiscoCola?
Not too much. Just trying to collect all my thoughts on all these pages all over the place, but feeling pretty good. How are you, Bopo?
Well,
Yeah, been there.
Those are references to our featured game, Yooka-Laylee, which I replayed for Underplayed. I had played it several years back before we started our show. This was your first time playing it, correct?
Yeah. It's been sitting on my shelf for years, just sort of sealed, waiting for my opportunity, and I took it.
Yeah. And I was doing a little research on Yooka-Laylee. I was always aware that it had been kickstarted back in 2015, 2016. But I didn't know how many backers it had. And, we both finished the game. You probably saw the credits, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
You can fast forward through the end credits. Did you do that?
Yes, of course I did.
So you probably noticed there are many, many, many names. Basically, everybody who gave to the Kickstarter got their name in the credits. Do you know how many people that is?
It's got to be over 4,000.
Yes, it is.
Jeez, I don't like the way you said that. I could not venture a better guess than that.
Try 73,000
Wow.
backers.
Are you kidding?
Yes. Who collectively raised, I think it was $3 million American.
I didn't even know that many people played video games.
Well, yeah, a lot of people interested in 3D platformers and Rare-vivals, as they're called, when a bunch of veterans of Rare come together to make a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie. So that'll be an interesting game to talk about because I don't think we've picked a 3D platformer quite like that for a featured game before, so looking forward to that discussion. That is all I wanted to cover here at the top, so we will move on to our secret games.
Secret games. Secret games. Secret games. Secret games.
In Secret Games, we each pick an indie game to review. We play it in secret. We don't tell each other what we picked. The only rule is that we have to pick an indie game that's new that we haven't talked about before on Underplayed. It can have something to do with our featured game. It can be completely different. It doesn't really matter, just as long as we haven't played it. We will start with you, DiscoCola. Let the mystery be no more. Reveal what your secret game is for episode 27 of Underplayed.
All right, my secret game comes from Retro Revolution, and I'm going to say this wrong, but I'll do my best. Ratalaika Games, and it's called METAGAL.
Oh, I've bought this game. This is on my backlog.
Oh, radicals. So
Yeah.
You're gonna hear about it. I just sent you that trailer if you need it, but I'll let you watch that while I go on.
Okay, I am watching it.
All right, so looking at the trailer, and just with your previous knowledge, you probably thought of one legacy franchise in particular, right?
Yes.
Mega
let's
Man.
I was gonna do a
sorry.
little joke. I was gonna
Okay.
count down from 3 and then say something that wasn't Mega Man.
We can still do that if you want.
It's fine. It's
Okay.
fine. Let's just keep going. I was gonna say like Super Mario Sunshine, just something completely random.
So that's kind of where I'm looking at the synergy for this episode, is that both of the games I played are very clearly inspired by another popular franchise. Bet you were expecting maybe a 3D platformer of some sort.
I kind of was.
Yeah.
I was expecting something along the lines of Tori 3D.
Yeah.
Or Tori 2 or Demon Turf.
Yeah. One of the games I'm really excited to play in that genre, I'm still still hoping for as a featured game.
Yes,
so I've
Frogun.
Frogun, yeah.
Frogun?
I'm waiting. So yeah, METAGAL opens nearly identically to Mega Man 1's story, which you don't see on screen because they didn't do stories in the NES days. General Creeper, the name of the villain, is taking away Dr. Ray's robot creations. And in this instance, they all resemble human girls. This has Dr. Ray not only resembling Dr. Light, but also sort of resembling Professor Utonium from Powerpuff Girls, as these androids are also considered his daughters. In classic Mega Man 1 fashion, there's an android that is either overlooked or left behind. That's this game's Mega Man analog, and her name is Meta, and she is the one that is transformed into METAGAL in order to save Dr. Ray and her sisters. And again, in classic Mega Man fashion, the kidnapped girls become the boss characters of their respective platforming levels. You beat the bosses, gain their abilities, and once you beat all of them, you go to the fortress and go through another 3 or 4 levels there. It's a Mega Man game. You've played one. So I'll do my best to talk about the rest of this in a bit of a vacuum, but I'm just sort of a Mega Man fan, so it's going to be a little bit of a challenge to not compare it at every corner. METAGAL sports a pretty solid 16-bit pixel art style and features a lot of those typical styles of platforming challenges like open pits, platforms that are on rails, little robot enemies, spikes, insta-kill lasers, and then it also has a couple of surprises like warp portals or gravity panels, and those offer some unique platforming challenges that aren't quite as common. In this game, you can jump, you can shoot your arm cannon, and you have a dash similar to the Mega Man X dash. I already broke the vacuum. Anyways.
It's okay. You're qualified to talk about both games now, so I think you should go ahead.
It can be the dash can be combined in tandem with a jump to gain a little bit more distance and speed, like you do in Mega Man X. There is a charge shot style attack that comes default, but as opposed to some of those other games, this requires weapon energy instead of just like sitting there and charging your shot. You can pick up gears, and these act as continues. They're a little bit different than lives. So you can opt to use these to recover health, and this can come in handy if you're far away from your previous respawn point and your health is low. You can sort of gamble and recover your health, because if you die without using a gear, you go back to a respawn point, which there's maybe 2 or 3 in a level. But if you use a gear when you die, you get to start on that screen. So it's not quite the same as a life, and you can also gamble to try and refill your health a little bit if you think you might be close to another respawn point. Some of the attacks you gain from bosses also sort of add to your mobility options a little bit. For example, the move you get from Dash Gal, who is more of a fire boss than a dash boss, but she gives you a flame dash, and you can use that as an air dash. Buster Gal will give you a mine that you throw on the floor, but you can also use that to jump on the mine and get an extra high jump. So there's a couple of extra mobility options as you beat some bosses. So how does METAGAL stack up compared to some of these other games? The first time I played it, I would say that it felt like a drag. I turned this on for the first time maybe a year and a half or 2 years ago. But this time around, I was actually kind of impressed. I gave it a little bit more of a shot and found myself having a little bit more fun. The mobility isn't perfect. It's just a little bit stale. It's not totally inedible, but definitely not fresh food here. The arc doesn't feel totally natural. It's a bit of a straight up and then straight down kind of a jump instead of having that little bit of a slowdown at the arc of a jump. But it's still serviceable. The dash jump feels a little bit better than the regular jump, but it's still a bit unruly at times. Climbing a ladder feels okay until you get to the top. Then you're stuck in your climbing animation until well after you probably should be. I think where this game really shines is in its level designs. Though there are at times some rooms that are pretty unreasonable, and there's also some obstacles that load in a weird way. I'm thinking specifically of like these lava waterfalls. In METAGAL, there's these insta-kill lava falls, something that is essentially designed to make you wait. However, you kind of have to wait a little bit longer than you would in many other games. The sprite for the lava falls has a bit of a fade away as it's done, but even if the sprite is just mostly transparent, even if it's just barely there, it will still kill you. So you have to wait till it's gone. But in general, the level designs themselves feel like the right difficulty with just the right amount of common enemies and just the right length, if not a touch on the long side at times. The boss battles with your sisters aren't especially interesting or memorable. I think there's a couple reasons for this. One is that the nature of the character designs themselves sort of limits the creativity that could have been taken here. Instead of having, maybe some robot masters of varying size and shape, these are all pretty uniform in shape and size, and you're in this boss room that takes up the whole screen, but in general, because of the height and shape of these boss characters, all of the actions really only taking place on the lower fourth of the screen. So it leaves it feeling kind of boring and hollow and empty. The second reason I think maybe these boss battles are largely forgettable is that each of the primary bosses becomes playable. So I think they had to stay maybe a little bit grounded in what maybe these boss characters were capable of. But not super memorable. The combat is also pretty lackluster. There's clearly like a weapon weakness system at play, like in most Mega Man games. And while you are able to eventually discover some of these weaknesses, many of the weapons aren't actually easy or fun to use, and the damage done isn't necessarily clear as to which one is creating weakness damage versus not. And your weapon options make the matchup very unclear. Like you've got Fire Dash, you've got Warp, you've got Shield, and you've got Bomb. And none of those are very obviously like fire is weak to water. So it's hard to know exactly which ones are the obvious next step. The final boss does save it a little bit. Like many Dr. Wily fights, it has a multi-phase fight. And while the last phase can be a bit frustrating once you understand the patterns, it can actually be kind of fun. It's easily the most challenging boss, but it's also the best designed boss fight in the game. Music is perfectly fine. Nothing that really sticks out with me, like Pralo's 14.3 billion years or Larkin's Sealed Vessel, but definitely good music and fits the game and the game style. And the coolest thing for you, Bopo, specifically, maybe the most annoying thing for other people, is that this is a really easy platinum. And I get the sense that Rata-like games are kind of known for this, but I got this platinum on accident in like 19 minutes. I think the record is like 2 minutes or something.
Yes.
So if you just want those...
So, yeah, what you don't know is that I have actually studied Rata-like games for years.
Oh, okay.
And this is something they are known for. If you go to their site and pull up their list of games, this is a list of all games they've either developed or helped to publish. This is what they're known for. Them and East Asia Soft, all of these publishers who are really focused on like pretty competent games that are fun, but also games that reward you with achievements and trophies. And I've played a handful of their games. I don't think many people have played all of their games because
there's a lot.
They have a new game out every like week or two, it seems like at this point. They've exponentially increased their output as well. So your suspicion is correct.
Okay.
Basically.
I had a feeling, and I
Yes.
saw a tweet that maybe like sort of put that in my head. But
Yes.
But yeah, I got this platinum on accident in 19 minutes, and I think the record's 2 minutes. So if you just want those sweet, sweet points, here's a game you don't have to beat if you don't want to. The downside to this, of course, is that I have very little desire to do things like get S ranks in stages, which is something the game features, or play the campaign as the other bosses. So I don't feel a strong desire to do either of those. This was recommended to me by one of my brothers as a Mega Man-like and an easy platinum, and on its own, it's definitely not bad. If I made this and it was my very first game, I would actually be quite proud. I wouldn't stop at METAGAL. I would keep going, but I would still be pretty proud. It doesn't quite scratch the itch of wanting a new Mega Man game, which, of note, is actually just entered its 35th year.
Yes, I saw that.
Happy 35th anniversary, Mega Man.
Yeah, congratulations.
So anyways, Mega Man fans shouldn't expect too much at all from this game, but it's not the worst way to spend 2 hours or the worst way to spend 19 minutes if you just want a platinum. I give METAGAL a 6.5 out of 10.
Okay, that sounds fair, given all the points you laid out. It is interesting that, you have this experience that is pretty full where you can get a platinum trophy or 1,000 gamer score or whatever the equivalent is on another platform in just 20 minutes or so. And you don't even have to finish the game. I think that's a little too far in the direction of offering that much of a reward. I wish it was a little more like complete as far as what it's asking you to do. So that's kind of unfortunate that like some people would just stop playing the game just because they want to get the platinum. But it all makes sense. I don't think I have any like questions, or it's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, I mean, I know you like the platinums, and it's not a horrible Mega Man like. So I still recommend it to you when you just have some time to kill, Bopo.
Okay, cool.
So yeah, METAGAL, you can play that on Switch, PS4, Vita, Xbox One, Windows, and Mac.
It is time for my secret game. My secret game is called Neverending Nightmares. And I just sent you the trailer, which you can now watch while I talk.
Okay, I will.
So Neverending Nightmares is very unlike Yooka-Laylee. It has nothing to do with Yooka-Laylee, like in the slightest. It is a 2014 horror game developed and published by Infinitap Games. I will read the game synopsis from the Steam storefront. Quote, experience true psychological horror as you explore nightmares inspired by the creator's struggles with depression and OCD. The defenseless protagonist must avoid monstrous manifestations of what haunts his subconscious in his quest to wake up into reality. End quotes. You got to love the alliteration with must avoid monstrous manifestations.
Right.
Love that. So this is a third-person, side-scrolling horror game. The art style is mostly monochromatic with some color here and there when it's really important.
Yeah.
Before I go on, I have to give a content warning about this game. This game depicts the aforementioned mental illness, self-harm, intense gore, body horror. If any of those things trigger you, I would encourage you to stay away from this game. And I'm going to mention a couple things in my review that might be disturbing just to listen to. So I will not give away like major plot things or anything like that. But in order to talk about how grotesque this game can be, I have to say something. So if you feel like you're sensitive, this might be a content warning also for this podcast. So just wanted to put that out there. But I'm going to go right into the setup of how this story gets rolling. And how it starts is you play as this guy named Thomas who is sleeping, and he has a dream of killing his sister Gabby. And that horrifies him. He quickly wakes up, and then Thomas walks around his manor with all of its rooms and hallways. And this is where you take control. As Thomas, you can walk, interact with things, and run. That's it. So 3 different actions you can take in this game. And if Thomas runs more than a few seconds, he starts to lose his breath, and he eventually needs to stop to breathe. And that comes into play when maybe you're being chased or you're trying to go somewhere quickly. You have to take it easy with how much you're running. You can't just run everywhere whenever you want. Thomas soon discovers scenes involving blood depicted with a really bright red color.
Mm-hmm. Very bright.
That's primarily how color is used in this game, is with blood spatters. And he makes his way to a nearby cemetery outside his home. And there he stumbles across a gravestone for his sister Gabby. It's revealed that she only lived to be 6 years old. And this sends him into an emotional state. He gets on his knees and starts crying. But then Thomas wakes up again. And when he wakes up a second time, he finds an adult version of his sister Gabby standing there next to his bed. And she reassures him that everything is okay. So it seemingly is false that she died when she was 6 years old. It seems that she is alive, and she says, I'll be around, you take it easy, go back to sleep. But Thomas decides to get up out of his bed after she leaves his room. He explores his manor again. Some things look a little different now. There's a barricaded door that leads to a very shocking scene that I won't reveal. In order to get past the barricade, he needs an axe. So he goes down into his dark basement and he locates an axe, but not before finding his own corpse. So a lot of messed up things are happening. He finds the axe, he wakes up yet again, and this time he's back in his bedroom where he woke up the last time, and the axe is now leaning against the wall next to his bed. So it is very apparent that Thomas has entered this titular never-ending nightmare where each nightmare influences and changes the next one that he enters. And over the course of the journey, as the player, you have to discover more of this manner. You have to find increasingly disturbing images and piece together this ambiguous story of the subconscious of Thomas. And there are lots of plot threads that are discoverable, and there are also different outcomes that can be explored to get different endings. I think there's like a main intended ending, but there are multiple conclusions to reach based on your decisions and like where you go. Along the way, you are chased by deformed enemies who are trying to kill you in very disturbing ways. And that's really it. It takes about 2 hours to get one ending. Takes probably a couple more than that to like find all of the endings and 100% the experience. But what I liked about Neverending Nightmares, this game feels like a descent into darkness and madness and violence in a way that's unlike other games I've played. There are images in this game that have kind of just seared their way into my mind, images that make my skin crawl.
Ooh.
And the game has really effective set design. As Thomas is going further down this rabbit hole, the manor is becoming dilapidated, the wallpaper is peeling off, pictures on the wall are changing. What's in the actual environment is changing. Sometimes you're not even in the manor. You go to other places too. And just when you think you've seen the most messed up thing, there is a worse thing waiting. There's a really nice restraint on use of color. Most of the game is black and white, but when you see that blood, it's very striking in its red color. But color also indicates what's interactable, which I like. So color feels disciplined in its use, but color also has intent. It tells you like what you need to use the interact button on to continue going. The art style is iconic. It belies this sense of innocence. It almost looked like a children's storybook to me at first.
Yeah, I'm kind of when I saw it, I was thinking of like Creeks or another Amanita game.
Exactly. It is a lot like that style. And it's actually a lot bleaker and it's more somber and morbid. And I do use the term morbid a lot to describe games, sometimes with challenging difficulty, but this is very morbid. This game is morbid in what it's showing you, the ideas that it's conveying. There are jump scares that are really effective. There's a lot of trickery with lights turning on and off. Shadows will move against windows very suddenly. Alarming imagery will pop into frame without warning. So there were times where I was actually really scared playing this game. And I've played lots of horror games where I don't feel that scared. This is some of the most scared I've felt playing a video game. So that is noteworthy. Thomas can die in his own nightmares in increasingly shocking ways, and there's like a horror to the anticipation of that happening, but then there's a separate horror of when it actually happens to Thomas and you're watching it. So this game does horror super effectively if you're into that kind of a genre. But going on to my dislikes, with this kind of heaviness in this game, I have to be in a specific mood to even want to play a game like this. But even then, it's not that joyful of a game to be lost in. For me, it made me feel really hopeless and forlorn. It's hard to recommend this game to a wide audience. I never want to replay this game again in my life.
Oh my gosh.
And that's not that noteworthy because I don't usually replay games
Right.
unless it's for like another stack of trophies or we're replaying for Underplayed or something like that. But I know I have no desire to pick this game up again. And before I actually rolled credits on the game, I played it in a couple sittings and I didn't have a lot of motivation to pick it up after the first time because I knew what kind of game it was by then. It's just so heavy and so grotesque and violent and gory and stuff. But I guess in a way it is challenging and not a lot of games have that kind of challenge to them. There's the mechanic of him running. You start to almost immediately hear Thomas run out of breath. You hear him gasping constantly, and he stops way too soon, in my opinion.
Mhm.
I know that adds to the horror element, that it adds to the defenseless nature of Thomas. You really, like, not only can you not fight back against creatures that are chasing you, you also can only run for about 5 seconds before he stops completely in his tracks. And becoming tired in this game becomes tiresome.
Yeah.
You know,
yeah,
it's
at a
hard.
certain point, it's just not even worth doing the action itself.
Right. Because at a certain point, I just want to get from point A to point B. There are stretches of this game where you're not actively being chased and you just need to navigate a house. I also had to backtrack at one point because I thought I had missed something or I wanted to see something again. And not being able to run constantly really killed the momentum for me. As far as the story, the open-ended nature of the plot is not my favorite thing inherently. And that's the central ethos of how the story is told is we're going to look at all of these vignettes, all of these images that may or may not have literally happened in Thomas's life. They're happening in his dreams, and dreams are very abstract things. And we need to, to get meaning out of the story, you have to interpret those things. And that's just not my favorite activity to do in a game. Some people will gel with that, and I just didn't. So overall, Neverending Nightmares is kind of mostly a walking sim. Your character is defenseless and uncovering a mystery, and there aren't a lot of buttons you're pressing. You're just kind of progressing. And on the surface, it's disturbing and frightful, which makes it a horror game. But at the center of it all, it kind of feels like the creation of someone who is lost or crying out for help. And the game is not difficult, but it's also not something that's easy to endure. It's not a challenging game, but it is an arduous one. And I think there's a difference. So I'm actually going to give this game the same rating you gave to METAGAL, which is 6.5 out of 10.
Okay, that's not bad. That's higher than I actually expected you to give based on what you said.
And Neverending Nightmares is playable on PC, Mac, Linux, iOS, Android, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, which is where I played it, and PlayStation Vita. So it's in a wide variety of places.
Cool. So I had mentioned that I thought the art style was a lot like an Amanita game, but obviously without the color. Obviously that stands out to me. It's sort of what has me interested in potentially trying this myself. I do kind of like disturbing imagery, especially if I'm in a certain mood. I want to compare and contrast another piece of media that you and I have both consumed. How does it compare to something like Midsommar as far as like grotesque, stuff that sticks in your brain? Is it much more than Midsommar, or is Midsommar a little bit?
Yeah, Well, you're asking me to compare two works from different mediums, which is like kind of challenging. But when it comes to just the idea of imagery that is indelible in a disturbing way, then I think it's pretty comparable. Yeah, there are images I still remember from Midsommar, and I saw that several years ago now. I haven't even rewatched it, and I remember some of the scenes in that very well. That's the feeling I have with this game is especially the moments where something shocking happens to trigger Thomas to wake up inside of another nightmare and then start a new nightmare within a nightmare. You know what I mean? That's
Right.
usually the dramatic part that triggers a change in the story is something shocking happens. Sometimes it's just a second or less. And then it's so shocking that Thomas wakes up, just like you would wake up from a nightmare. So
Right.
I think that scariness, that shock value is like, that makes nightmares is very much intact.
Okay.
Yeah.
What kinds of things are influencing your different endings? Are certain choices very significant? If you played through the game more than once, are you going through the same nightmares each time in the same order?
Yeah, so there are kind of chapters to the game. And after the game, you can do a chapter select. The first 3 or 4 chapters you go through are the same no matter your ending that you get. But then there's there's a crucial fork in the road
Ooh.
where you need to make a slightly different decision. And a lot of it comes down to just where your character goes. And you're not, for instance, given a blue pill or a red pill and you're asked to pick one. You know, you're not given a dialogue tree and you're choosing one dialogue that is clearly drastically different. You're making more just kind of subtle decisions on where you're moving Thomas. So it's a little vague. You don't know what ending will be given to you because, again, this is about abstract dreams. So making different decisions didn't really give me a clue as to what was going to happen next story-wise.
Okay.
But it is subtler. There's one that I had to look up because I don't think I would have had the patience to discover it myself. But there is a sequence where you need to open a certain door at a certain time to get a path that leads you to another ending. I don't think I would have discovered that on my own without looking it up. So,
All right.
Yeah.
Well, to be honest, I might actually check this one out if I can find it maybe on sale or something.
Yeah.
I'm loving the art style.
Yeah.
And yeah, just depending on my mood, it might be right up my alley.
I think it's down a lot of people's alleys, but I also think it's not down a lot of people's alleys too. So it is hard. Again, it's hard to give a mass recommendation for this, but you like the 100% on trophy lists. This is a very easy 100%. It only has
Oh, okay.
it has 3 golds and 1 silver, and they're basically
Progression.
it's basically about progression and getting all the endings.
Okay, that's not bad.
And then-
I was thinking of like maybe throwing it on Switch or something like a
No,
house.
it's easy.
House is not something I necessarily want to complete. But,
Right. Yes. Yes. So those are our secret games, METAGAL and Neverending Nightmares. Let us move on to our review of something a little lighter. Yooka-Laylee. It is our featured game. So Yooka-Laylee is a 2017 3D platformer developed by Tonic Games and published by Team 17. The game synopsis from the Steam storefront reads, quote, Yooka-Laylee is an open-world platformer from genre veterans Tonic. Explore huge, beautiful worlds, meet an unforgettable cast of characters, and hoard a vault load of collectibles as buddy duo Yooka and Laylee embark on an epic adventure to thwart corporate creep, capital B, end quote. I actually think that's one of the best descriptions I've ever read for a featured game on Underplayed. That is pretty complete, but we'll keep talking about it before we give our thoughts. So Yooka is a green chameleon and Laylee is a purple bat, and the aforementioned antagonist, capital B, is a capitalist B.
Yeah.
So it just
Straightforward.
It works like 3 different ways.
Yeah.
if you think about it. Yeah. And Capital B runs the company Hivory Towers and is assisted by Dr. Quack, who builds a lot of Hivory Towers inventions. And Hivory Towers' goal, as far as I understand, is to suck up all the books in the world for profit? Question mark?
Something? I don't.
They want books.
Yeah.
And Yooka and Laylee are in possession of a book called The One Book, which is a really powerful book. And it is stolen by one of Dr. Quack's inventions. It's a giant, like, book-sucking invention. And this results in all of the pages of the one book, or pages, to be spread across Hivory Towers and its 5 worlds within. The 5 worlds are Tribal Stack Towers, Glitter Glaze Glacier, Moody Maze Marsh, Capital Casino, and Galleon Galaxy. And there's also a sizable area of land you can explore within just Hivory Towers as kind of a hub area as well to collect these pages. And Yooka and Laylee have to locate all these lost pages, reassemble the book, and track down Capital B. This is a 3D platformer that serves as a spiritual successor to Banjo-Kazooie from the N64. It's also similar to other games like Donkey Kong 64 from that era. It was developed by Tonic Games, which is made up of veterans of Rare, who created Banjo-Kazooie, and Donkey Kong Country, which is one of my favorite 2D platformers of all time. So they have a rich history with this kind of genre. Yooka and Laylee learn a variety of abilities that can help them traverse. They can learn new moves by spending the quills that they find around the stages. The quills are the currency of this game. They can visit an NPC named Trouser, and at Trouser's shop, they can buy different abilities to help them move faster or to surpass different obstacles. Trouser is just one of the side characters in this game. He's a snake who wears pants.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're wondering how that works, you're going to have to look up a picture. It's actually pretty inventive, I think. I think it's pretty fun.
Be careful. Turn the safe search on when you're Googling trouser snake.
Yeah.
So.
When you're searching snake in pants,
Yeah.
parental guidance suggestion. There are other supporting characters like Vendi, who is a vending machine offering game-altering tonics. There's also someone named Dr. Puzz, who can transfigure Yooka and Laylee to complete specific challenges. There are also recurring characters who offer little tasks and challenges to get various pages. There's a family of pigs. There's a minecart named Kartos. There's a cloud named Nimble. A charming dinosaur named Rextro, who unlocks arcade games for Yooka and Laylee to play. And each pagey in the game is collected in a different way. Some are for completing time challenges. Some are puzzle-based. Some focus on precise platforming or combat. And some are memory or reaction-based. So there is a variety of tasks you're constantly being hit with in this game. And they vary even from world to world. In total, there are 145 pages, over 1,000 quills, and there are other collectibles like Ghost Riders, Molly Cools, Health and Power Extenders, Pirate Treasure, and Play Coins, which unlock those arcade games with Rextro. And then each of the 5 worlds come in 2 sizes. You spend pages to unlock them, and so there's this initial size where you find some pages, unlock a world, and it is kind of its base size. But then you can spend more pages to upgrade the stages to their full scopes. And then there are more places in those worlds to explore and to find more pages that you can keep buying more stages and so on. So DiscoCola, 3D platformers have seen somewhat of a comeback in the indie space, but it's still a hard genre to come by, right? So last episode, I talked about Tori 2 and Tori 3D from that same developer. You've got MacBat 64 and the recently released Super Kiwi 64. So all that's just from one developer. You've got Demon Turf. You've got A Hat in Time, which is on our list of potential future featured games.
Yes, it is.
There are probably a few other. Froggun too. So there are a good amount of them, but it's not like there's this huge.
They're not Metroidvanias.
They're not Metroidvanias.
Yeah.
They're not roguelikes.
Right.
When it comes to 3D platformers, indie or not, what are some of the ones that you've played that like come to mind when you think of 3D platformers?
Yeah. So I guess I'm going to go into some DiscoCola history here. I never had a 64, so I've never played Banjo-Kazooie. I've never played Mario 64. I've never played Donkey Kong 64. So a lot of my comparisons come from the PlayStation side. And even then, for a good number of years of my life, I was very much I don't play 3D games pretentious kind of a person. So it's mostly coming from Spyro games. I've played like Croc, Legend of the Gobos. So I've always actually liked 3D games. I was just kind of being a jerk for a long time. But most of my knowledge is coming from Spyro games, and I have most of the Spyro games that there are.
Yeah, Spyro is a touchstone for me when it comes to like growing up with these kinds of games. I never finished Super Mario 64. I tried to play Donkey Kong 64 when I was a kid, and it was so massive and intimidating that I just never could keep going with it. That game just keeps going and going and going, and there's so much game in that game. I would add, I think it's kind of forgotten as a 3D platformer because of its sequels, but I would argue that Jak and Daxter, the precursor legacy,
That's true.
is a notable one.
I did play all those.
Right.
Yeah.
Not, especially the first one, not quite as Spyro-y in how micro the levels are and how you're constantly moving from stage to stage. And I don't even think as many collectibles, but you've got the orbs, you've got different collectibles in each stage that you're trying to like, you can 100% all the stages, right?
Yeah, very fun.
That is kind of a goal in Yooka-Laylee is just the collection. The collectathon platformer is something that asks you to do lots of different challenges to get 100% in the stage before moving on to the next one. So never played Banjo-Kazooie when I was a kid either. And that's what Yooka-Laylee is a spiritual successor of. And from what I understand, Yooka-Laylee is larger in scope and scale, more like Donkey Kong 64's size and scale than Banjo-Kazooie's. That's speaking as someone who finished neither of those previous games, but that's what I understand. And many, many people experienced this drought for years of these 3D platformers, like not having one.
Yeah, everything's got to be a first-person shooter in the PS3 era.
Right.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are the other, like we talked about roguelikes and Metroidvanias, you know, those just tend to sell better, I think.
Yeah.
But there's that audience who craves that feeling from the 90s, like the late 90s, early 2000s, all those 3D platformers. So Kickstarter for this game was very successful. We talked about the 73,000 plus people who donated to the Kickstarter. The game is a self-professed Rare-vival. All of these veterans who are coming back together to make a 3D platformer. And there was a lot of anticipation leading up to this release. And I was really anticipating this game too.
Same.
I didn't give to the Kickstarter, but I was following it very closely. And now here we are. The game launched more than 5 years ago. And so my question to you, did Playtonic accomplish in making a successful 3D platformer? And what are your overall thoughts on Yooka-Laylee?
I think to answer the first part of that question, technically, yes, they succeeded in making a 3D platformer.
A successful 3D platformer.
I mean, on paper, it's probably successful. It is mostly okay.
Right.
That is what I will say at the top. But like I said, I've never played a Banjo-Kazooie, so a lot of my stuff is rooted in Spyro games, and I love especially the first trilogy Spyro games. So I'm kind of coming at it from that angle. So I'm just stating this all at the top because, yeah, I haven't experienced Banjo-Kazooie. My very first review of the game that I read or consumed in any way came from The Completionist, who is someone we have both historically enjoyed. Generally, I agree with him on most of the things that I watch, but I got to be honest that I don't hear. I think he has some rose-colored glasses in his review of the game, and he even mentions like all of the things that people see wrong with it going at this, wanting to agree with the completionist, I kind of see all of these things that are also wrong with it.
Gotcha.
Stages are, in fact, either too large or too empty. This could be solved by, unfortunately, more collectibles. To throw this to Spyro games, they kind of lay them out in a way that helps leads you to the next place without having too much of the collectibles out of reach. There's a little bit of that here, but it's easy to get on branching paths and then lose your place and find yourself way too far away from a trail that you didn't get to follow initially. And before you know it, you're on a completely different side of the level before you can go back to that fork in the road. And that's part of why finding quills kind of sucks in this game, is that the levels are so big, but the number of quills is so limited, but it's also difficult to find all of them. So it's a hard thing to balance, and I don't think they do it very well.
There's a grand scale to a lot of the stages, and the quills are only so large. And there's also a draw distance issue where you just lose them if you're not close enough. You actually can't see them. Even if you're looking directly in the direction of one, if you're far away enough, they kind of disappear.
Yeah.
Or they're so small that they're just imperceptible. Yeah.
And I think, the levels here are just way too big for the trail of quills to actually be leading you in a more effective way that it could be if maybe the levels were smaller or if there were more quills. Most pages, another collectible, are pretty straightforward in what you're supposed to do to acquire them, but can also at times be unclear in specifics or just really so far-reaching that the reward of the pagey itself doesn't feel like it was worth the work that I put in to get to it. To give you an example, I'm thinking of the snowmen and their hats. It's not necessarily clear, like, whose hat belongs to which snowman, and there isn't a great way to keep track of which hats and which snowmen are where.
Yeah.
And so if you're playing this for the first time, you're having to cross the level 5 or 6 times just to make sure that you get the correct hat in the correct snowman's hands, if you can even find all the hats.
Right. Yeah. So you're looking for 10 things in that instance. You're looking for 5 different snowmen, and you're looking for the 5 different hats. And they're not all in the same open place. Sometimes you need to go into caverns or like sub areas to find a hat or a snowman. And you have to sometimes use guess and check. You get a witch's hat. And does that go with this one? Oh, I tried that one. That doesn't work. I got to go to this one all the way over here. They're so disparate in where they're placed.
And something like a Spyro game would have put the hat that you're looking for is in the same relative area as the snowman that it goes to. Right. If I'm not mistaken, in Yooka-Laylee, like, they could be on totally opposite ends of the map.
They might be, actually. Yeah.
I couldn't keep track eventually, but...
Or just have all of the snowmen except all of the hats.
Mm-hmm.
You just need to find the 5 hats and the 5 snowmen. Right.
But, yeah, and you only get 1 pagey for all of that. Like, maybe give me 1 after I give 2 snowman hats.
Yes.
And then
you're getting into so many things that I was going to mention. I love it. Like I'm going to back you up on a couple of these things later.
Oh, I love it. Okay. Controls. Rolling is a bit unruly, or maybe it's like the camera that, as it acts in concert with rolling, gets super unruly. So it can be hard to keep your direction true when you're rolling, especially when you're on some of those rotating platforms that actually require you to roll on them to traverse.
Right.
So when possible, if I can, I just fly over those instead, because I end up, turning 70 degrees to the left when I don't want to. In addition, flying in concert with your camera can also get really unruly in sort of the same way. There's just a lot less risk with flying with an unruly camera. It's a lot easier to correct.
Right. When you say flying, there are a couple like different maneuvers in this game.
There's like grades, to flying. I'm talking about the final
flappy flight.
Yeah.
Yeah, where you throw Laylee up in the air and you kind of just can go wherever.
Yeah. It gets a little bit unruly at times. So when I was playing this, I have here, I got to the casino and I was thinking, man, I could replay this now that I know where some of those like really difficult things are or how to do some of these tasks. And maybe I could have a better time on a second playthrough. I do like these collectathons. But then I got to the casino. And more specifically, I got to Rextro's arcade in the casino. And man, Filbo, that arcade. Floofting Filbo, that stupid game. It's the worst. It's the worst, Bopo. I hate that game.
Yeah. It's this season's Pumpkinhead guy.
Oh my, it's worse.
It's worse than
that.
Pumpkinhead guy?
Oh, I hate it so much.
I would have to actually think about which is worse. But
I hate
that's
it
fair.
so much. It was enough to make me not want to play the game again. Man,
you have to do it twice.
Yeah, these aren't the kind of games either that you like turn on for a few minutes for fun just to play around for. These are games you complete. These are the kinds of games you turn on, you get 100%, and then you're done.
Right.
There's a lot of other like frustrating things in the game, challenges and whatnot. But this is easily the worst for me and makes me turn this into a one-time experience.
Yeah, you point out something interesting with these kinds of games where the game is attempting variety in so many ways. And that is a really great thing. I actually have that under my, positives category.
Mm-hmm.
But when something is challenging or difficult in a way that's like very noticeable, it sticks out like incredibly well when everything else is relatively easy or like fast to attain. And then you've got one thing that sticks out. It's going to be a pain point for most players who are trying to get 100%. And then that's the thing that people remember.
Yeah, it's too bad. And you're right. They're like, as you're talking about that, I remember like the isometric section of, was it the ice level maybe?
Yeah, the fortress.
That was fun.
Mhm.
I loved that. That was cool.
Yeah.
And most of the arcade games are fine, at worst.
They're certainly like the right level of difficulty. Most of them, yeah.
This game is a mess. I don't know how it made it into the game as it is, but whatever.
Yeah.
Moving on.
We'll talk more about that kind of stuff later for sure.
I did run into a few bugs. I don't remember all of them off the top of my head, but in the casino, it was during the boss fight and my characters became unable to jump.
That's so weird.
Yeah. And leaving the boss fight, being able to jump outside of the boss fight and then coming back didn't help. So I was worried about this because the boss fight starts directly after the minecart section, which is already like plenty difficult on its own. So I was worried when I went back that I would have to do this minecart section again. Like I had to close the game to turn it back on, and that's how I had to get my jump back. I was worried I'd have to do the whole minecart section again just to get back to the boss fight.
Oh yeah, thankfully.
You don't have to.
Yeah.
But that was really frustrating and weird.
So weird that it's hidden there.
And because like I did the boss fight a few times too before I lost the ability to jump. It just sort of happened.
Huh.
And it was weird. One of the things that is a little bit more of a subtle burn, like a numb pain, is that I find a lot of the levels lack flow. For me, the least egregious was the swamp. That was a level I actually kind of enjoyed and found myself able to navigate pretty well compared to other levels, specifically the ice level, which I hated and couldn't find my way around very easily and always got confused about which sections were connected where and stuff like that. You also have a very sizable underwater section, which is not at all times visible. Also, swimming just kind of sucks in this game, I think. But yeah, I found myself liking the swamp and found a little bit of flow there, but other times found myself just sort of unable to navigate properly. I think the bosses are all pretty neat and fit into their world in, if not an appropriate, at least a fun kind of way. I find the swamp boss a bit unfair at times. Like I said, swimming doesn't feel great, and you have to transition between swimming and being airborne, and that doesn't really happen very easily, and the boss kind of moves a bit too quick at points for the fight to feel totally fair.
Yeah. That's the one with the tentacle, right? And you're kind of wading through the water. You're like really slowed down, and then you have to jump and float like to avoid
certain moves,
swipes and stuff. Yeah.
The final boss fight also isn't clear at points and results in you taking damage when you probably shouldn't. I know that we talked off air about the capital B fight, and I know
Yeah.
that you probably have some.
That fight can be a capital B, if you know
Yeah,
what I'm talking about.
it
That
sure
sounds like
can.
where you're going with that.
But it didn't give me as much trouble after a while. After I learned a trick, which I already have forgotten, but I did learn one trick that helped me get through some of the rougher parts of that fight. So yeah, this is one of the games that I finished first for the season. Like I finished this one before most of the other games we've done. And I'm trying to recall things that I liked about Yooka-Laylee. I've said a couple, but unfortunately, most of what is coming back to me is just a lot of the frustrations I had. I think just smaller levels and more of them, I think, could have solved a majority of the issues in this game. For me, Yooka-Laylee is going to get a 6.5.
Okay, that's still overall a positive score on the scale from 0 to 10. So again, I replayed this game for Underplayed. I played it before we started our podcast years ago and had to replay it for this episode recording. And I think several years ago, I might have given this a 6.5 or maybe even a 7. But replaying it, I realized, like I needed the excuse of a podcast episode to want to replay this game because I don't think I ever would have replayed this game after that first time. And a lot of the problems for me were more apparent and found myself having a tougher time getting through the game a second time, even though I had 100%ed it on PC a while back. Doing it again on PlayStation was just hard for me. So this took a lot of play sessions for me to finish. And overall, I think Yooka-Laylee has heart and ambition and dedication to what it's trying to do, but I think it lacks a lot of polish and restraint to make those attributes feel noble. I think, I will start with what I like, though. I do have some positives to point out. Again, the game has a wide variety of challenges and things to do, and just the idea of that is admirable for me. You're collecting the ghosts, you're navigating dark caverns, and I like the challenges where you're trying to get through an obstacle course really fast, using lizard lash on platforms in record time, where there's a lot of fast movement. That's really fun for me. And yeah, the collecting the hats for the snowman definitely has its pain points, but the idea of it is cool. I just wish it was a little bit better implemented. I actually like the later game maneuvers, like Flappy Flight, because by the end of the game, I'm at the point where I'm trying to mop things up. I'm trying to 100% all the maps. I've maybe gotten 10 to 20 pages in each world out of 25. So now I need to go back and get the rest. And having maneuvers like Flappy Flight really sped things up for me, especially in vertical levels like tribal stack towers. That's very valuable and saves you so much time in that traversal. I think the abilities make sense for a chameleon and a bat. I think they're like fun ideas for maneuvers, even though they don't always feel the best to use. The idea of using like sonic stuff for the bat and the flights and flapping around and using your tongue as a chameleon is really fun. You can tell they like looked at these two different animals and they thought like, what are all the ways that an animal could be used in like a cartoonish way? So that's fun. The environmental art and scale can be really impressive. Again, going back to tribal stack towers, even though that level is probably too tall, the fact that it is that tall is really astounding to me. And looking off into the distance, you see all these places you can't actually go to, but it's the background art that I think really sells the look of that place. The game can have a pretty nice, like polished sheen to its look sometimes. I think like the shadow work and the contrast can look kind of a step above compared to other 3D platformers. And then I also like a lot of the musical themes by the composers Grant Kirkhope, David Wise, and Steve Burke. You and I have talked about David Wise off air, and he contributes themes to this game, and I think they're mostly successful. They can be playful and catchy. They can sometimes be a little bit too cartoonish or too childish.
Yeah.
Though
I have down a little bit repetitive at times too.
Yeah. And when you're in these stages that are so large, you're actually grinding on these stages for sometimes like 4 to 6 hours to get 100% in Tribal Stack Towers and Glitter Glacier and so on. And so you're listening to this music over and over again, so it can get tiresome. And I guess that's where I get to my dislikes with this game being too immense. I think the game is too big. I think there's too much quantity and not enough quality spread out among that quantity. I think we wait too long before being able to traverse these stages effectively. If they're going to be this big, give me abilities that, give me the Flappy Flight earlier, maybe. I just thought of this, but my last secret game of season 2, Omno, that game spread out the quantity and quality really well, where as the stages got progressively larger, the game was rewarding me with abilities that let me teleport and go really fast and go really far. So I wasn't as intimidated with that scale. But here, it is just such a slog to go from point A to point Z and all the places in between and then have to backtrack.
Yeah, eventually what I did after the swamp was I took whatever quills I had and I entered the levels and got the upgrades and then started going back so that I had those at the start of the new levels.
Yeah. And whereas in other games, I might feel more energized by the idea of 100%ing everything that I possibly can in World 1 before I go to World 2. I'm usually that kind of player where I want to do all the side stuff I can. It's kind of a mini completionist thing.
Yeah.
Where I want to do as much as I can before I unlock World 2. And then by the time I get to World 2, maybe I have so many pages that I can unlock the expanded version of World 2 so that I can just go at the full stage from the jump. I love doing that, but this game actually rewards your time, or it actually rewards you with saved time by only doing the bare minimum before moving on to World 2 and 3 and 4 and so on. So the scale doesn't feel disciplined. The game feels a little overcooked. Like, I wonder, did they keep adding to the game because they felt like they had to with all the stretch goals they met with their Kickstarter? Because from what I can tell, this game was a labor of love. These people were really passionate about returning to their roots and creating something that a lot of gamers hadn't seen for years in a 3D platformer. And then I get the sense that they would have made Yooka-Laylee regardless of having a Kickstarter. It would have been this labor of love, and it might have been a smaller, tighter package. But I wonder if after they raised $3 million, did they feel this obligation to just keep making the game larger and larger?
Ooh, maybe.
And I would say the game's about 5 hours too long. Being in a world for more than 4 hours can get stale, and I wish it was more like Spyro, where we're just kind of dipping in. There are more stages, like you suggested. We're dipping in, getting like 5 pages, and then getting out, going into the next stage. I think that would have been a better way to cut up all this content. You could still have 5 stages that resemble Tribal Stack Towers. Maybe they all kind of have the same look. They look like they belong in the same place, but they're not all connected. But some quills and casino coins are hidden dastardly in places that are very obscure.
Yeah.
And that's not helped by the fact that, again, they disappear with the draw distance and they're kind of tiny in this large world. The game just generally feels janky for me too. Yeah. Combat can feel imprecise. Platforming feels floaty. The level layouts feel kind of shoddy because of the lack of that tightness. And I think a contributing factor is also the fact that those quills, like you were mentioning, they don't lead you intelligently. They're just kind of spread out in groups, and you just have to happen to look at them to collect them all. They're not leading you like the gems do in Spyro. Some of the pages are require very little effort. Some require a lot of time and effort. Collecting the 5 ghosts in each level, that's my example for really, I only get 1 pagey for this. You could spend an hour running around a stage just trying to find a missing ghost, and you need to find 5 of them.
One of them's thing is that he turns invisible too.
Yes, you have to listen for him and fire a sonic blast at him to reveal him. So you can't even scan the map to see. You have to walk on foot to every place to make sure you find all 5 of those ghosts. And your reward is 1 pagey. But I might get another pagey for doing a 2-minute obstacle course that's easy that I nail on my first try. And this goes back to my strawberry comment from Celeste, where like with hundreds of strawberries, it's hard to make them all on the same like level of difficulty. I get that. But at least the strawberries are optional. Pages are mandatory to progress. And there's such a wide delta in some of them as far as difficulty. So that's unfortunate. Some challenges are controller hurtling in difficulty. I agree with you about the arcade game in the casino. I have several more I want to mention. I have several more I want to mention in a moment. I won't say them all right now, but a lot of them are difficult not because of an intended higher difficulty, but I think because of jankiness and weirdness that causes them to inadvertently become difficult. And that just makes it more frustrating because I get the sense that's not an intent of the developer to make it that difficult. It's like an oversight. It feels like a first draft when you're playing the casino Rextro game and you're trying to respawn, but there's no way to respawn without losing another life and the level moves too fast.
And maybe it takes forever to respawn when you're ready to.
Yes. Yeah. It just, the amount of points you lose for dying gets exponential. It's just, it's frustrating in so many ways. The dialogue for me, it's trying to do the cute like N64 platformer dialogue. And I know that this is a hallmark of like Banjo-Kazooie. But the dialogue happens really often, and for me, it's just kind of pointless and full of forgetful jokes. There are also annoying sound effects that you'll hear when you load a challenge again and again. The boo, put, like listening to that hundreds of times gets old. I also had a bug. It didn't involve not being able to jump. Mine involved just losing all sound. I was in a room in the casino, fighting a room full of enemies. And I think there was so much activity going on that it somehow glitched the sound and everything was just muted. I didn't have any music. I didn't have any sound effects for a good 5 minutes. And then it just kind of came back. It all like returned. I'm not sure why, but thankfully not that bad of a bug. I know some people have worse bugs. Overall, for me, Yooka-Laylee is fun looking on the surface, but at the center, it doesn't really feel lively, which makes for this really awkward contrast. I don't really care a lot about Yooka or Laylee or these characters other than how they look, which feels superficial, but that's how it is. When I'm in one of the 5 worlds, I feel as though I'm grinding more than I'm discovering. And in such wide open spaces, I can actually feel pretty trapped in this game because it just doesn't seem to end. But the end game of collection, the collect-a-thon part of this platformer can hit a nice flow state for me because I am eventually rewarded with those nice maneuvers to get around fast. But just getting there is somewhat a slog. I know I've laid out a lot of negatives for this game, so you might be expecting a super low score from me. I'm actually going to rate this a 5 out of 10. Again, several years ago, I might have rated this like a 6.5 or 7. So just replaying this game and it not being as fresh might impact my score this time. But I did have a lot more cons than pros for Yooka-Laylee. If I could go back and save myself like several hours, I think one thing I would tell myself is, again, do the bare minimum to unlock World 2 when you're in World 1. Like figure out how many pages you need to get and just get that much and keep going because that way you'll keep things fresh as you go along.
Yeah, if I would have known what I know now, I would have just gone quills, get the abilities, then go back.
Yeah.
Even if I have to do tribal stack vanilla first, if I have all the abilities, I'm okay collecting the pages, going back and then supersizing it, and then just supersizing everything else as I go along the first time.
Gotcha.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. The first time I played, I unlocked the base level and then I supersized later. And this time, knowing that that mechanic was in place, I actually supersized immediately on all worlds.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think I was able to supersize tribal stack.
I don't think you get enough pages ahead of the first time.
You don't, but I did for worlds 2 through 5.
Yep.
And that was a different experience. So like I had these much larger stages. And by the time I got to worlds, you know how like you can kind of access 4 and 5 at the same time?
Yeah.
before going to the casino, I dipped into Galley and Galaxy and I bought those upgrades
Right.
and then dipped
Yeah,
out. And
that's what I did.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's I don't think I did that the first time. So that really helped like the casino feel fresh again. I had bad memories with the casino from the first time with trying to find some of those coins.
Yep.
And so this time I didn't cash in any of them for pages. You have to collect 190 of these coins for 19 pages out of the 25 pages that are in the stage. So it's very unlike all the other stages. You're doing all these like miscellaneous tasks just to get a handful of coins, and then 10 of them gets you a pagey. So you can mix and match which challenges you're doing to unlock different amounts of pages, but I resolved to get to the 190 before cashing any of them in, just so that I knew I had 190.
Yep.
That saved a lot of frustration
Did
this
that
time.
too.
Good.
Didn't look that up, but I
That's
did,
good.
I did
That was
same
good
thing.
intuition to
Yeah.
do, because I remember getting 10 and going like, oh, I can cash that in. And I lost track of how many I had. And then I was looking up guides as far as like where all the coins are. And you can miss a coin that's among a group of like 6 coins really easily. So you have to be methodical.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention.
Yeah, there is a tonic that helps you find missing items, but it's a lot like the ghost writer that we were talking about, where you have to actually be near it,
You have to be near it.
this item that you're missing, and then you get a little whistle. I want point me in the direction. You know,
Oh, gotcha.
do
Yeah.
like sparks at the end of the game. You unlock the ability for sparks to point you toward what you're missing.
Yeah, that's helpful to know, because my suspicion was that it was a sound effect that plays when you're nearby, and I toggled that tonic on, but I never got a sound effect. So I must have not been near a collectible ever. But
Well, and its radius is weird, sometimes inconsistent, and like will be wider for different kinds of items. So if you're
Oh.
near like the health bar extender or something,
yeah.
that has a wider radius than like a quill.
Oh.
And maybe if you get that health bar, you won't hear the quill secret go off until you leave and
Gotcha.
come back.
So it happens for quills too.
It does,
Gotcha.
but
It's not as
it doesn't trigger quite as easily.
Yeah,
At
that makes
least
sense.
in my experience, it seems.
So it seems like the more precious or rare a collectible is, the more immediately it'll start to go off and tell you
Yeah.
that. So I bet like for pirate treasure too, it'll like
I don't
Starts
know if
to go
it
off?
does, because like
oh
I had found all the ones that I needed before I got the tonic, except for 2, but those 2 are like not near anything that you stand on.
right.
So you wouldn't know if you were
Yeah.
close anyway, unless you actually knew where it was.
Yeah, I don't know that I ever found any of those pirate treasures on my own. I think I looked all those up. One is just absolutely nuts as far as where you need to go. Going back to those challenges that are the worst, there is the Capital Casino. It's called Hurdle Hijinks, by the way.
Yeah.
Hurdle Hijinks is, we've explained why that's terrible. It is just basically what the trick I found to that one is: don't focus on getting all of the point pickups. Just focus on looking, like try to block out all the feathers that give you points and just try to filter that out. Look at the obstacles and just focus on getting to the end, and also get a feel for how delayed the jump is.
Ugh.
And know how far you jump with the screen scrolling to properly jump over enemies. And I would always like time it wrong so that I would jump too late. And you jump, and like mid jump, your pelvis hits the enemy's head, and then that's a life lost.
Yeah.
So
Or 2, depending on
Yeah.
how you respawn.
yeah. And then the first time you lose a life in Hurdle Hijinks, you might lose 200 points. But then by the time you lose your 4th or 5th life, you're losing thousands of points.
Yeah.
And you need 25,000 points or something to
Yeah.
pass that game.
It's
so
absurd. That game is
Yeah.
ridiculous.
I think that took me a solid, I won't say an hour.
I
but
was on
better
it for
part.
over an hour.
You were?
Oh, yeah.
Let's see. Capital Casino Minecart Challenge, where you have to get 150 gems.
Yeah.
That one took a lot of restarting for me. That was trouble for me both the first time I played Yooka-Laylee and this recent time. The inept boss fight is a complaint for a lot of people, mostly because it's not clear like when you can hurt inept.
Yeah.
You have to do it like when he's starting to strike you. You only have like a second window, and you have to hit him a ton of times.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of phases in
Yeah.
that one.
Telegraphing not super clear.
Yeah.
But once I figured it out, I did actually end up enjoying that boss fight once I knew what was going on.
Right. Yeah, that's probably my favorite boss fight. Like when I think about the others, I actually like the one in Glitter Glaze, the one with the ice guy on the wall that you have to hit with fire and he slowly shrinks and speeds up. That's pretty fun for me. There is one that I saw people complaining about online, and it wasn't too much of a pain for me, but I understand why it's a pain. And it's in Glitter Glaze Glacier. There is a place called Gloomy Gem Grotto. I sound like a crazy person when I say all these names. There is a dark cavern, basically, where you have to navigate a lot of platforming for a long time with no checkpoints. And then at the end, Yooka and Laylee have to slide down an ice platform and hit a moving platform at the bottom. And it's kind of like aiming Plinko, which is to say it's kind of a guess about when you need to let them slide, because once they start sliding, you really can only nudge them left or right slightly.
Yeah.
And if you miss that platform, you have to start at the beginning of Gloomy Gem Grotto. And that happened to me not enough times that it got like super frustrating, but that's another noteworthy one.
Yeah. I think there's something also that on the way down can damage you. And that was the part that was frustrating for me.
Gotcha.
That like ruined my jump. It's the timing and the maneuvering wasn't too difficult for me. I've done a lot of challenges like that. But I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, that there's something there that can also damage you at the same time.
Okay. Yeah, that's probably the source of others' frustration too. And speaking of sliding, the thing that actually frustrated me more this playthrough than hurdle hijinks, I think, was the slide in Hivory Towers. I think it's next to World 5.
Oh, yeah.
There's a masochistic amount of obstacles. You only have like, I don't know, 35 to 40 seconds to get down this giant series of slides. It sounds like you didn't have too much of a problem with it, but I got super frustrated at this particular one for some reason, because I kept getting very close to the end. I'd be like just half a second short.
Yeah.
And now you have to restart it all. And then I didn't even get that close for another like 20 tries. It took me the better part of an hour to do that one.
No, it was definitely challenging, and I had to give it a lot of tries. But dying isn't punishing in this case, and sometimes it's just faster to like lose all your butterflies and just restart the race.
Yes, that was another pain point is you have a health meter that's represented with butterflies. Every time you get hit, you lose a butterfly. And by that point in the game, I had like 10 butterflies or whatever. But if you fail the challenge, and on that particular slide attempt, you lost 7 butterflies, when you retry, you will not regain any of those butterflies.
Yeah.
You start with 3 out of 10 because you lost 7 on the last try. So then you start doing this math where you think like, well, I can't make this a serious attempt and get hit only 2 times and expect to make it. I'm going to get hit 5 times at least.
Yeah.
So this one is just a waste of a run. I'm just going to kill myself so that I get back all of my butterflies.
Yeah.
You know, just little touches like that could be fixed and dramatically improve the experience.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Yeah, you know, I had down that we could have talked about comparisons to other 3D platformers, even older 3D platformers that have been, you know, reimagined or remastered, like the Reignited trilogy with Spyro. But I think we've covered it. You know, I think those games just do scale in a more focused way.
Mm-hmm.
And collecting the gems is fun because you feel like you're on a roll.
Yeah.
You know, you feel like these 3 gems lead to these 3 gems. Now I'm going up this levitating platform. I wouldn't have come up here without those gems guiding me.
Yeah.
And I think just like the game needs to guide itself more.
And then if you get to one that's like off the beaten path or at the end of a path, it's one of those pink 25 worth gems.
Right. And here the quills are just worth 1
Yeah.
a piece. So there could be something to play with there where kind of like the quills we're collecting in hurdle hijinks, where some are silver and gold, some are bronze.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what you could play with here. Maybe all the quills in the game most of them are bronze and they're only worth 1. The silver are worth 5 and the gold are worth 10.
Yeah.
And then they still add up to 200 per stage. That would be interesting.
But just smaller stages, man. They're just so big.
They are so big. And I guess final question, your favorite and least favorite worlds. You kind of talked about how Moody Maze Marsh might be your favorite just because you seem to flow with that one.
So yeah, that one's my favorite. Found myself enjoying that one a bit more than the rest. As far as a stage itself, I kind of hate Glitter Glaze the most, I think.
Yeah, because you got lost.
Yeah, it's easy to get lost. There's tall vertical sections. There's a basically hidden whole underwater level that you can't see until you're underwater.
Yeah, there are 2 underwater places.
Oh, that's right.
One is unlocked with expanding the world. But
I never saw the non-expanded version, I guess. But,
there you go. Yeah.
There's just I don't like that level, even though I am more frustrated with the casino overall, just having some just awful challenges.
Right.
Yeah, I think Glitter Glaze is just the worst level.
I think the stage I like the most in concept without actually liking it in practice is the casino, actually. I like the idea of, first of all, it's a theme that's not as obvious as an ice level or a swamp level, like a casino level. That's fun.
Yeah.
It plays into the capitalist nature of capital B. It's funny. There's a lot of like fun toys in that stage. But in practice, the dastardly hidden coins are just evil, like not fun to track down that stuff. You're looking in every corner of every building. And again, it's sprawling. But my favorite is probably Galleon Galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
I like the space theme married with the sort of light pirate theme. You get to be a pirate ship and use different kinds of ammo. I even like the boss stage in that quite a lot too.
The little like planetoid thing.
Actually going back on it, I think that might be my favorite boss fight in the game. And then even though there are lots of sub areas, it's very obvious where you should go. And it's easy to check things off because everything's separated in the like water, like there's distinct kind of chapterized places to go in Galleon Galaxy. That's very clear. Whereas Glitter Glaze, things kind of blend together. It's hard to recognize like what connects to what, like you said. My least favorite is probably Moody Maze Marsh, actually, because it's so spread out.
Yeah.
It sprawls in all these directions, and I lose track of what connects to what. It all looks homogeneous. And I tried to, of course, there's no map in this game, too, so you have to use your eyes.
Oh, man, maybe a map would help.
Maybe.
Yeah.
Maybe. Maybe once you collect a certain amount of pages, it gives you hints on the map where things are. I don't know. But, if you go a certain direction in Moody Maze Marsh trying to find a certain area and you're wrong, you misremember it, you have to restart again and find a different direction. And I just got so lost in that place. I think that's probably intended that it's kind of a, it's a moody maze.
Yeah,
it makes sense, but
yeah.
It's just not fun to get lost in that one for me. Any other notes about Yooka-Laylee?
Well, you mentioned Donkey Kong Country at the start and how that's one of your favorite 2D platformers. And the sequel to Yooka-Laylee does lean more into that. I don't super want to play it because I've heard it's incredibly challenging, very difficult. But I guess I'm curious, is that something that you're looking into?
I have looked into it lightly. I've seen some videos about it. It definitely looks more my style than this game. It looks maybe a little more focused. It does still look like it has challenge, but also might be something that I prefer to the 3D collectathon that's going on in this game. So yeah, I would like to play that one someday. It's called Yooka-Laylee and the Impossible Lair.
Yeah.
And who knows? Like, it doesn't sound like you're super jazzed about it, but.
Well, it looks awesome. And I think it does look more focused and just more fun in general. And I think they took my favorite parts of Yooka-Laylee and maybe focused on that in the sequel. So I would love to play it, but it sounds like something that I would not easily complete, which might be more of a frustration.
Yeah, I think that's another one the completionist did
Yeah.
on his account. But yeah, we'll look into that one more. We might figure out that it's a good candidate for a featured game someday, do a follow-up in the Yooka-Laylee world. I like that they're trying new ideas with Yooka-Laylee, that they didn't just make another giant
Yeah, it's not
3D collectathon platformer.
Why not, man?
And it seems like they pumped it out pretty fast after making this first game, which is pretty impressive too. So maybe that's where a lot of their funding went after their successful Kickstarter. And they still, are pretty high up on the leaderboards as far as records for Kickstarter campaigns in the categories that they were considered. So that's pretty impressive what they did and that they generated so much interest. And I do think the game is successful in a couple ways. It does have heart and ambition, but in practice, I think I had a little less fun this time than the very first time I picked it up. But that is our review of Yooka-Laylee. You can play it on PC, Mac, Linux, Nintendo Switch, PlayStation 4, and Xbox One. DiscoCola rated it a 6.5. I rated it a 5. That's the end of this episode of Underplayed. You can find more of our episodes at kzum.org/underplayed and on common podcast services like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Our music was composed by Jack Rodenberg. Our art comes from Oni Mochi. Underplayed is on Twitter at underplayedpod. You can find me on Twitter at Bopo. That's BO_PO. Check out that same handle on the GG app where you can see my game lists, such as potential future featured games. You can see a list of all the games DiscoCola and I have vetted to someday play as featured games, which is pretty fun. It's a little sneak peek into the future.
And I am at DiscoCola on Twitter and on Twitch, and I've started putting together some GG lists as well.
Oh.
I've got nothing to show off yet. I had a little bit of trouble with the browser version, but I am there as well.
Awesome. Well, next time we will have 2 more secret games to review. Our featured game will be Sayonara Wild Hearts, a music action game developed by Simogo. Until then, everyone, keep on playing.